Hey, it's the piss test here. This is part 2 on really bad crap NBA shooting or scoring stars and why it actually hurt your team. Now, I've gone through Knucklehead number 1 in the first one. Now it's time for Knucklehead number 2. Now, he's not that big a fish to fry in comparison to my next one, but stay tuned for number 3 because that's a really big fish. But this one is Antoine Walker. Now, some people might remember Antoine Walker as kind of a Celtic hero, sort of. I mean, if you were that desperate. Who started in 97 and went to 2008. Now, he was actually, by his stats, was an okay player. At one stage, he actually was a 20-10 player. In other words, he over 20 points and 10 rebounds. And most people would say, well, he's a good player. Well, I beg to differ. Basically, if you look at his career, he barely made the playoffs when he was actually leading the team, and he eventually did win a championship with Miami, and he can thank his lucky stars that actually got on that team. But anyway, I want to talk a bit about his stats because they don't look too bad. Now, number 1, his scoring average over his career was 17.5, which is all right. He had quite a few over 20-point-a-game seasons, top 10 a few times. He averaged almost 8 boards a game, which is good for a forward. So that was good. 3.5 assists, which is good for a forward. And without an enormous amount of turnovers, and his defensive stats look okay on the surface. Now, why was this guy shocking? Now, if you look at his on-off stats, now, I explained that in part 1, but I'll go through it a bit again. Basically, it means how good you are off the court, or your team is off the court. Sorry, how good your team is when you're on the court and how good your team is when you're off the court, offensively and defensively. If we look at that, we actually find that defensively he's not too bad. -1. That's quite a good defensive player. But offensively, believe it or not, apart from all the points he was scoring, worse. In fact, overall, you could say he may as well not even be on the court. He was actually hurting his team offensively. Now, you might think, well, why? I mean, this guy, he could post up. He had all kinds of moves and all that. He could shoot the 3. In fact, he led the league in 3-pointers made in 2001. But he also led the league in attempts for 3 years. And his shooting percentage was horrible. He was what you call a professional bricklayer. Now, what's the big deal about that? Well, in the end, true shooting percentage is very important. And there's a simple reason why. And what it is, true shooting percentage, is basically how efficient you are if you add all your field goals, your 3-pointers, and your free throws together, and you come up to an efficiency rating. Now, the average is about 51%. Now, if you actually think about it, most teams have roughly the same amount of possessions. So, the team with the most efficient scoring usually wins the game. That's pretty much how it pans out. Unless you're a kick-ass rebounding team or a kick-ass defensive team, or you force heaps more turnovers than the other team, it's all about true shooting percentage. Now, a league average generally is about 51%. This guy, for his career, was 48%. Now, what does that mean? That means that every time he's throwing up his bricks, the rest of his team has to play like Superman to make up for it. The rest of his team has to actually score about, I don't know, 54, 55% true shooting percent, because basically he's taking so many shots that all their shots have to be efficient just for them to be even in the contest. Otherwise, you have to out-rebound by about 10 or force another extra 5 turnovers in the other team. I mean, this guy basically was digging a massive hole for his team to get out of every time he threw up those stupid shots that he thought he could make. So that's pretty much the reason why Antoine Walker rarely led his team to the playoffs. Basically, his shooting was so efficient that he was hurting his team. You may as well have a bunch of average players playing offense than him on there. And if you think that's hard, well, I guess, I don't know. What can I say? Try and prove me otherwise, I don't know. But that's about all I want to spend on Antoine Walker, because I actually feel a bit sick talking about him. So that's part 2 of why your shooting star will hurt your team. And stay tuned to part 3 where I've got the really big fish to fry.